Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing yet another movie review. This movie is a horror comedy from the USA, English language, released in the year 2017, directed by Steve Ellison, aka Flying Lotus, and this film is called Kuso. So Kuso is set in the near future. Los Angeles has been devastated by an earthquake, it's killed many people, and the survivors are trying to push on with their lives. So their new reality is a very terrifying reality because they're living in ruin and poverty. They're covered in scabs, so it's clear that they've got this horrible sickness, and their encounters with each other are getting increasingly bizarre. And so those situations spiral well out of control, and their descent into hell is a very, very tough one. And so what these people have in store for themselves is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Kuso. I'd been trying to track this movie down for the longest time. When I saw this trailer a few years ago, I thought it definitely looks like my cup of tea. And it wasn't until it was released on Shudder where I finally got my opportunity to watch it. So expectations for this film were at a very curious level. I didn't know as to whether or not this would be very good, whether I would hate it, but the reason why I wanted to watch it is when I saw the trailer, it looked very, very bizarre. And I love bizarre filmmakers. I love bizarre movies that are not afraid to push the envelope as far as an endurance test is concerned. So this director, Steve Ellison, aka Flying Lotus, which is his stage name, he is a hip-hop artist, I believe. I'm not into hip-hop, so I'd never heard of this guy before. But the reason why this guy's name excited me was that it was his directional debut. And so is this going to be his cup of tea, or is this going to be, a good try, but not really something for him? And so that does bring excitement. Are we uncovering a new director to really look out for, or are we is this basically a director who's going to have a go and basically disappear back into the wilderness? And so the expectations were at a curious level, and I will say, after watching this film, I was absolutely shocked at how far this director pushes the boundaries. This is a film that does have problems. It actually feels like an experimental film. It feels like a directional debut where he's testing the waters and he's throwing things out there and he's seeing what sticks and what doesn't stick. And this is ultimately what a directional debut is. You're going to throw things out there, you're going to see how the audience reacts to it, and then you can actually build on those things in the future. So directional debuts aren't necessarily going to be great, but it's the experimental sort of feel that you would expect. And that's exactly what Kuso is. This is a film that doesn't follow a coherent plot. It is more of a case of an anthology film. It's not supposed to be an anthology movie, or as far as to my knowledge, but it actually feels like an anthology in that it doesn't really have any relatability. It's just these characters who are trying to live their lives in a new reality, and that reality is a very surreal one. And but it just comes together all under the disguise of this, basically ruined city. And so a lot of people, if you want traditional storytelling, you're not going to get anything out of Kuso. But what makes Kuso stand by itself is the ability to stick the middle finger up at the PC crowd. And especially in today's society where everything is offensive, I believe that a lot of directors are afraid to push that envelope. They're afraid to offend people, whereas Steve Ellison is not afraid to stick the middle finger up at the PC crowd. A lot of people, when this actually made the festival circuit, a lot of people walked out of this film. And that actually pleased the director, and that was something that was so pleasing. It's a breath of fresh air, is that directors who are making films based on what they want as opposed to what other people want, is that a lot of directors, they water movies down to a point where they lose their identities because they want to make money and they don't want to be seen as offensive. But Kuso is offensive with a capital O. This is in a very, very extreme film. This has got bodily fluids splashed on the screen in a very unapologetic way. You've got sex scenes that are absolutely incredibly shocking and bizarre. You've got excrement. You've got people covering themselves in excrement. You've just got these horrible things, that full frontal nudity. You've got sex scenes that are very explicit, but as I said, done in a way where you have to actually see it to believe it, especially right at the end. And surprisingly, not only are you laughing at how shocking this film is, but the script is actually quite witty. And so Flying Lotus, aka Steve Ellison, really knows what he's doing. And this movie does a great job at embracing ugliness. And the ugliness of the world is that this is done in a way that's very caricature and so far out of left field that it's absolutely insane. But it's done in a way where it's not really promising anything that is sugar-coated. It's showing you a way of life in a very extreme way, but it's ugliness. And it's reveling in that ugliness. It's basking in all of its excremental sort of glory, and it's doing it in a way that will appeal to people who can appreciate extreme cinema and cinema that is not afraid to take chances. And so the cinematography was excellent. It was very, very surreal. The world that was created, very neon light. You've got a very good soundtrack, and it's just got a strong sense of dread, a strong sense that, okay, you're watching something that is funny, but it's also really creeping me out too. It's just the way they look. They got scabs all over their faces, and it actually made me feel repulsed. It made me feel sick. And so I actually thought to myself, okay, I'm feeling a little bit queasy in the stomach, and if this doesn't stop, I might have to throw up. And so that was something I absolutely loved, is that this is everything that extreme cinema should be. So you've got characters that are very out of left field. You've got interactions with these characters that I thought were very funny. Not only chuckle sort of funny, but laugh out loud funny. And so I just thought it went in there with an intention to offend people, but also allow extreme fans who are sick of watered down garbage to really revel in the notoriety and revel in the rebellion that this movie produces. And so that was all fantastic. And you've got the continuation of the film. It's not a very long one, so the negatives to this movie don't really derail it. So that was what I loved about Kuso, but there are unfortunately situations and issues in this movie that I had a problem with, and that biggest issue was that it felt like, as I said, an experimental film. Now, it doesn't try to be an Oscar-winning movie, for obvious reasons. As I said, it wants to be offensive, but I just think it revels too much in that offensive quality, and it's just the lack of fluency and the lack of coherency in the plot. The extremity to this movie gives it an excuse for existing, whereas I thought with a little bit more attention to detail as far as storytelling is concerned, the extremity to this movie could have had a little bit more of a purpose. But pushing that aside, this movie comes across as a comedy, and so you are laughing at it, and so that kind of gives the movie an excuse for existing. But I just thought as though it could have had a little bit more punch behind it if it had a little bit more attention to the actual storytelling, whereas this movie comes across as an experimental film, and it actually comes across in some instances as a music video. So it's clear that this directional debut is from a music background, because it has the music video sort of quality. It has a horror anthology sort of quality to it as well. And it's not a violent film. It's not a movie that has jump scares, but just the whole world that this director manages to create is just very, very uneasy. As I said, it's extremely graphic in its sexual depictions, and these sexual depictions are pushed to the absolute extreme. So if you are a fan of extreme cinema, Kuso is definitely a movie to look out for. It's not perfect, but for a first effort, I thought it can be applauded, because it's one of those movies that is very un-PC. It's embracing its ugliness and not making any apologies for it. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then definitely check out Kuso. But be warned, this is for a very, very acquired taste. It is extreme, and it is actually going to make people feel very sick, I am sure. So overall, for Kuso, not a brilliant movie, but definitely one that's going to last in the memory. So for that, I have to give this film 2.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.